Okay, so thank you all for being here today, and I just wanted to share some things with you that I learned. I recently took a course called Grantsmanship for the Research Professional in August. It was a virtual course, and it was taught by Holly Falk Krasinski, and some of you may be familiar with her name because she's the founding president of Nordup. And it was a very interesting course. It involved faculty as well as staff people in my position and staff people in like the OSP type positions. So it was actually really useful and informative. And I felt like it really spoke to a lot of the things that we do in our positions as FRSOs. And so I wanted to share with you some of the additional things that you can kind of do. I consider them kind of like next steps for supporting your faculty. And there's several paths forward for opportunities for research administrators to do more to support their faculty. And it could be drafting sections of the proposal, such as the budget justifications, maybe even helping to prepare a letter of intent, and even reading through certain aspects of the proposal, like the abstract, for instance, and also helping with project management and proposal organization and editing some of the content, like the biosketch content and things. So go to the next slide. All right, so these will look familiar to all of you, the typical kind of proposal elements on a project. And first thing I wanted to ask everyone is going to be a question about the roles within your units. And sort of in your role as a research administrator, I'm sure that you have other roles and responsibilities as well. Maybe you're doing the accounting, maybe you're the research administrator, maybe you're the department administrator. I mean, there's lots of different roles. And so I wanted to ask if you all would, if anyone wants to answer, how many of you already work on a number of these different proposal elements besides just like the budget and the justification and like high use? What else do you guys do any of these other or touch any of these other aspects?
Andra, go ahead.
So I do all of these. I help with all of them because I'm involved in the program planning and the program development. So I get to have a hand in everything.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I do as well. And sometimes also cost share development as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say I do. Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I do a lot of these, as well as human subjects documents, making sure that they're meeting all of the requirements, especially for NIH proposals, because there's a lot involved with NIH, human subject documentation and clinical trials.
I do a lot of it. I haven't done references in a while.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So one of the things I wanted to share with you that I tend to do when I'm working on a proposal is as I read through the solicitation and any other supporting guides, like for instance, when you're doing an NIH proposal, for instance, you have the SF424 guides. And if you're doing, say, a NASA proposal, you have their guidelines. And so it's really helpful to create kind of like a checklist of all the documents that you're going to need. And so I like to prepare a spreadsheet that will list kind of all the necessary components, and especially if you're dealing with a lot of PIs, co-PIs, subawards, things like that, it can be really helpful to be able to track that you've received all those documents and to make sure that you're that everything is complete. You've uploaded things into Cayuse or the Fastlane record, the sponsor portal. And a lot of times I'll note the page limits and like font requirements. Sometimes I'll even include information on what each section is supposed to address. And so I wanted to show, if I can, a checklist. Let me see. I'm not used to this presentation mode thing, so bear with me. So can you see the checklist that popped up in front of the, okay. So this is just an example of the checklist that I created for when I was working on a COBRE submission with a faculty member. Because there's basically, you're putting together multiple proposals, if you will, because each of the cores, like the admin core and the other cores, the research projects, they're all essentially a separate proposal that all kind of go together in a single submission. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And so what I would typically do is I would include all of these where it's green and says received. I would first have like required in that field. And then once I've received the document and I've uploaded it for the PI, then I mark it received. And that's just an easy, quick way to see what I'm missing, or what is still pending, what's complete. And so just putting together one of the type of a checklist like this can be useful for both you and the faculty member. So just an idea of something that, a useful kind of tool. And okay, whoops, sorry, I missed my presentation. Okay, so then the next thing, shoot, sorry about this. I gotta try it again. Okay, here we go. So the next thing you can consider are to help the faculty is creating a timeline, and with a task list. You can also use like a task management system like Trello or Microsoft Teams, different things. You can even just use a spreadsheet if you want. And it's important to meet regularly with the faculty member and with the team to discuss the progress that's being made, to schedule meetings, things like that, manage the communication and the collection of the required subaward documents. And so a timeline can help you address all of these and keep track of all of these, making sure to help guide the faculty that nothing's falling through the cracks, and also to keep everyone on track, because sometimes it's easy for faculty to become distracted with the narrative and things, and maybe they're not paying attention to the fact that we still need the bio sketches, things like that. So these are all elements that are useful to have on your timeline. And so this is one of the ways that you can do more, is to create this timeline and help manage the project. And so some of you may already do this, like in relation to like budgets and forms. But I'm wondering, do your timelines typically include any writing and other documents? And do you often attend the planning meetings with the PIs and with their team? And do you keep notes on and manage communication? So that's just a question for all of you to ask. Do you typically do those types of things?
Hi, Monica, it's Christine.
Hi.
I just wanted to tell you that we pretty much handle it from the beginning to end. So once a PI submits a first ticket, we immediately set up a meeting, and I say we, Denise Wallen and I both sit with a faculty member, discuss their project, discuss their ideas, timeline them out completely. So it's an immediate, at that meeting, we say, okay, deadline for the sponsor is November 1st. We have to back out time for OSP review and approval, back out time for us to actually enter it in. If it's a complicated project, like they have many subawards or it's a collaboration of some sort, we have contingency plans for that as well. You know, we back out even further, and then edit times to edit the narrative. Denise will ask that they send her a draft early on in the process, and that way she can give them feedback, and then later as it gets cleaned up, she can look at it again. But it could be a month, it could be 2 months. It just depends on the complexity of the project.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christine. Okay, so I just wanted to show kind of a sample timeline. What I will normally do is start with the deadline for the sponsor and kind of work backwards. And so you always know that there's going to be those elements, like when you need to, the OSP review needs to happen before, usually at least 2 days before it's due to be submitted to the sponsor. Before that, you're going to need to route the Cayuse record. Before that, you're going to need to complete the budget and upload all the subaward documents. And so typically that's the way I'll create a timeline. And this particular one has something elements in it like to the draft revised based on red team feedback. So basically what that is if a PI is submitting a complex proposal, a large one, interdisciplinary, sometimes they might ask FRDO to arrange for external reviewers to kind of review it, give feedback, and that way they can hopefully have an edge at the time of the review because they've gotten a lot of external information, reviewers who hopefully have had experience and hopefully have even been awarded the same type of grant. So these are things that would need to be built in, but this is a timeline. If you're going to ask for like a red team review, or if you were going to want, if your PI is going to need editing assistance of any kind, then those are the types of things that have to happen sooner as well. And you need to build in more time. So it won't work if a faculty comes to you with 2 weeks before the deadline and wants like a red team review and all of. So of course your timeline is going to depend on how much time you're actually given, to how much notice you're given that they need assistance. Another important thing, a useful tool, is a task list. And so typically we'll, especially if you have multiple people working on a project, so in the FRDO, we will, on occasion, we will work together on a large proposal, and it's helpful to kind of know who is assigned to do what, who has agreed to do what, and that can help ensure that nothing falls through the cracks. So something like, oh, Monica's going to work on the budget and budget justification, and oh, I thought Stella was going to do it, so I hadn't finished that up, something like that. It helps avoid any kind of confusion. So I find task lists to be helpful too. And also you can remind the PI with a task list if there's something that they had promised to provide as well. Let's see. So the next thing is proposal guidelines. So something I tend to do, going beyond just getting the solicitation and reading through it, is I will register to get sort of updates and things on the funding announcement. A lot of times you can do that, and like if you're working on a proposal, where Fed Connect is the portal where you get all the information for the solicitation. A lot of times they will have questions and answers that and you have to register to be able to see and read and get that information, those questions and answers. So it's really helpful because a lot of times other PIs, other staff will have the exact same questions as you do. And so it's a good way, a good place to gather information, like are letters of support allowed type of thing, which the solicitation does not always directly address. And so you can register to get this information. I also, a lot of times NSF will offer webinars and workshops, information sessions on particular solicitations. It's really, really helpful to watch those. And again, another place where you can ask questions a lot of times and sort of FAQs get answered. It's important to read the review criteria. I think a lot of times we may not necessarily think to do that because it's sort of like, well, the PI is writing the narrative, but it's actually really helpful to understand the review criteria, so that way you get kind of an idea of what's important to the sponsor, what's going to be scored, and then of course follow the proposal instructions exactly is super important, which I know we already all know that. So budget justifications. One of the things that I found is really helpful in organization and the presentation of the proposal is to use the categories developed by the agency and putting them in the exact same order as they are on the budget form itself. And of course, make sure requests are reasonable. You don't want to let your PI, I've had people ask, well, can I just have sort of a pot of money that I say is for sort of other necessary materials and supplies? And it's like, well, no, not, you can't do that necessarily, but just kind of budget for what you're actually going to need. Include all the amounts and items requested from the sponsor, and then of course make sure your totals add up. And I've heard from several reviewers that it's really helpful on your budget justification to have the totals in there. It's a lot easier to follow the budget justification and to compare it to the budget basically. And it makes it a lot easier to follow if you do include those totals, because on occasion previously I used to develop budget justifications and I didn't want to put the totals on there because if the budget changes, then you're having to update all those totals. But when I found that reviewers actually really like that, it's helpful. I started always including the totals on there. Okay, biographical sketches. As we know, the formats vary by agencies, and so I have found it can be really helpful to create a template for consistency. We know that NIH bio sketches, they have a template already on the NIH website, but what I have found is that's helpful, and especially for people who maybe haven't submitted to NIH before, is to just take that template, put in a little kind of text box in each section, and that text box should include all of the elements for that particular section. So for instance, NIH has a very interesting little section called the personal statement. And that's actually a really important piece of the bio sketch. And so I would recommend that you always advise that your PIs go ahead and fill out the personal statement, making it relevant to that particular proposal. And in that section, they would briefly describe why they are well suited for that role on the project and kind of the relevant factors, such as the aspects of their training, their previous experimental work, their technical expertise, things like that. And it should be specific to their role on the project. So every single NIH biosketch should have the personal statement specific to the project. And then of course with the NSF bio sketches, as we all know, they're moving to Science CV and their fillable PDF documents. And so those, they're going to be a lot more standardized than they had ever been before and a lot more consistent. So we'll have to see how that goes. One thing I wanted to ask everybody is, does your department or do you have a plan for what you're going to do if you've got a faculty who comes to you with an NSF submission and they haven't updated their bio sketch to either the Science CV or the fillable PDF? Do you guys have kind of a plan for how you're going to handle that, especially if it's last minute? Nobody?
This is Elizabeth.
Mhm.
I've already been waylaid on that one. I just did it. It's not that hard.
This is Mary Jo. I'm really hoping the lack of response doesn't mean that people aren't dealing with it.
This is Estella at the School of Engineering, and we've alerted our faculty, I don't know how many times, but people still seem surprised. And we'll see how it shakes out. I'm taking Stephanie's class next.
Yay. Thank you.
I would also, this is Mary Jo again. I also just want to interject that in addition to changing the format, I don't know if you saw the recent notice from NSF, the content is changing slightly as well in terms of appointments and including appointments even if they don't bring a salary. And so there's a whole FAQ on that. And this is up to the PIs, and it's all about disclosing what other commitments they have, professional commitments they have. So you might need to update your faculty on that part too.
Thank you, Mary Jo. All right. Another thing you can do to help out the faculty is for instance, when you're helping on the NSF collaborators and affiliations, you're collecting that document. Of course, the PI is responsible for filling that out and for knowing and including any of their co-authors like in the last 48 months. One thing I found that's useful to help with is making sure that they're using the current template, because there have been a number of templates, versions of the templates. Making sure it's filled out correctly because it requires last name, comma, first name, and then middle initial if you know it. And then also I have seen where I've compared the collaborators and affiliations document with the bio sketch. And essentially you can tell from the products and publications section, depending, I mean, because they have to list the dates and things. And so a good thing to do is to check the bio sketch against the COA document and make sure that they've included those people listed in the products and publications section in the COA document if they are within that 48-month period. And so, and it's very important because the NSF uses this information during the merit review process and to help manage the reviewer selection. And in the course I told you about that I took from Holly Falk Krasinski, she did also note that this document is very important because COI violations can face federal charges. And so we want to avoid that, of course. The facilities, equipment, and other documents resources. You've probably had PIs come to you and ask you if you've got a boilerplate for this section that they can use. It's okay to provide a boilerplate, but really this section again should always be customized. So always, if you do provide your faculty with a boilerplate, encourage them to definitely customize it for the project, because proposers are supposed to include the resources that are directly applicable to their project. And this section speaks to the criterion of environment, and that's one of the scored criteria typically on proposals. And so you want to make sure that they're not just including a laundry list of all the things that they could have access to if they needed it, but things that they actually would probably be using on the project. The abstract and project summary. This section is very important because it usually becomes publicly accessible once the project is funded. And also this section's typically supposed to be written in plain language so that even a non-scientist could understand it. And so again, this is a section where we as research administrators or proposal developments people could easily read through this, and we should be able to understand, at least get the gist of what the project is about. And if we can't understand it, probably it's too technical, and you could advise that the PI may want to revisit that and make sure that they're actually writing it in an approachable way and for a non-scientist type of person. Other things that you can do that can be very helpful is you should read the agency mission statement, because every solicitation relates in some way to the funder's overall mission. And it's important for the faculty to tailor their proposal to the unique interests of the funder. And if you've read the mission statement and you have an idea of what the project is about, you could definitely give feedback to the PI on that. Reviewing the funder's website, looking for priority areas, particularly important for like foundation type proposals. Obviously, their priority areas tend to change. And as we know right now, with everything going on with COVID, a lot of sponsors are looking at ways to provide expedited funding for COVID-related proposals. You can also check to see other grant awards that were made by the agency, kind of see who they have funded before. And also, you can typically investigate whether or not anyone from UNM is a previous recipient of an award. So like NSF and NIH have very robust award databases basically that you can go to, and you can check and see if anyone from UNM has received an award for that type of for that particular directorate or that particular program. And those can be areas I've had faculty ask me to see if anyone else has submitted and been awarded. And that person, if yes, the person that has been awarded could be a potential resource for the faculty member to be able to talk to, maybe get some advice. Maybe that PI would want to collaborate in the future with them. Maybe they could provide feedback on the proposal narrative. So there's lots of options for that. Letters of intent. I'm sure that you've seen some proposals will actually require a letter of intent. Other proposals will say that one is encouraged but not required. One of the things I learned in that course that I took is that she advised that the PIs always include one even if it's not required. And the reason is because it assists in the review planning, and it does provide an overview of the research project. And so basically, if your PI is saying, well, it's not required, you should still encourage them to go ahead and submit one. And the other thing too, a lot of PIs that I've worked with seem not to take advantage of is the assignment request and recommended reviewers. This is another area where basically it empowers the PI to let the sponsor know who they think should be a reviewer, who maybe should not be a reviewer, also what kind of expertise is needed for the review to review this proposal. And so it empowers the PI to be able to direct their proposal to the best place possible. So I know a lot of the faculty I have worked with don't typically fill these out, but it's encouraged that they should think about doing that going forward. And but one of the things though the PI has to be careful is they should recommend who a reviewer should be. They shouldn't demand it. And so again, this is an easy thing that if they've written this document, we as research administrators can review it. And if it sounds like they're, saying, I demand that so-and-so not be a reviewer, we can tell if the language is too strong that way. It should be more like, I believe there's a conflict, or so-and-so is a direct competitor and I request that they not be allowed to review. So we can easily take a look at that and give feedback to the PI as to whether or not their language is appropriate.
Monica, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. We're at a 12-minute warning. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. We have about 12 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so a cover letter is also another way that if the sponsor doesn't have a place where you can submit that kind of request for like suggested reviewers and suggested expertise, a cover letter is also another way to get that information to the sponsor. So some important things to think about the review criteria. And again, this is all the kinds of things that we can look at when we're looking at a proposal. So looking at the significance. So significance, approach, innovation, evaluation, those tend to be parts of proposals that you'll notice that are scored. And so significance, basically, why does it matter? The approach, how are you going to do it? Evaluation, how will you know if you're successful? Innovation, what's new? These are all kinds of things that we can look at a proposal and get a gauge on, and let the PI know you're not explaining why this is important or why somebody should care about it. The budget, we all know that's how effective will you manage the financial resources. So though we're all familiar with the budget piece, but those other sections, those are ones that I think we don't typically look at, and we could, if we wanted to go a little further and help the PIs, especially if we have the time to do it. And basically the review criteria is always pretty much the same. So like NIH, for instance, they look for significance, approach, innovation. NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities, they look for the exact same thing. They call it intellectual significance, quality of the project, quality of innovation, things like that. So basically all sponsors are looking for the same review criteria, more or less, and then some of them will have some additional criteria if it's a specific type of call. Organization and presentation is really important, and that's another thing that we can help with as research administrators, because actually reviewers like really organized, clean proposals. And so if we can help by creating templates to ensure consistency, templates like that we would send out to the subawards to use so that everything kind of matches. If we're following along with the terminology, section headers, things like that, we can help the reviewers have an easier time reviewing. Essentially what they do, they'll get a stack of proposals, and a lot of times the ones that look the cleanest, most organized, easiest to review, those will come to the top of their pile. The ones that are more difficult, that have used smaller font sizes, things like that, typically will go more toward the bottom of the pile. And so one of the things that we can help with, of course, is font size. We can mention to the PI that they might want to start with 12-point font actually, and then only decrease the font size if they run out of space. Also for the review criteria like significance, innovation, transformation, it's a good idea to bold those words, and that draws the reviewer's eye to that particular section. And if they're looking for the significance, you're making, the PI has made it absolutely obvious that where to find significance, where to find the statement about the transformation of the project. Another way we can help faculty is through finding funding to help them. A lot of times though, if they're senior faculty, they already know where to look for funding. They already have a lot of resources. And so we, as research administrators, we all have access to Pivot. We can log in, we could set up initial searches for them, and we could send that search to the faculty person, so that way they can run their own searches based on that saved search that we've created for them. Also, FRSO, each FRSO in the college receives a weekly list of funding opportunities, and they disseminate those. So you could also ask to get on the FRSO list to receive those and go through those and disseminate them further to your departments if you wanted. You can even sit with one of us and we could help you set up an initial search. And so basically you just need kind of a list of keywords to start that for your faculty. So in summary, basically, some of the things that we can do to go further is to have increased involvement in the various proposal elements. We can do timeline creation and project management. We could help with finding funding, and we can provide resources. And I've included a list of some resources that might be useful to you. Letters of support versus reference letters. This comes directly from NIH. I pulled that from their website. Every proposal pretty much needs a data management plan. So we have resources here at UNM, as well as other resources that are available for like data repositories and things. Postdoc mentoring plans. I get a lot of questions about that. And there's a really cool website, National Postdoctoral Association, where they kind of give step-by-step as to how to write a good data management plan and what it should include. And of course, the federal-wide research terms and conditions is a spreadsheet essentially that shows when you would require prior approval for changes on proposals. So here's some resources for graphics and visualization in case your PI needs that. We used to offer that through FRDO, but our grad student graduated, so we don't have anyone currently that's helping to do this. And then there's Twitter resources. I don't tweet myself, but I think a lot of people do. And so this is, I had no idea that there were these Twitter resources available. So that's it. And I think if we have a couple minutes for maybe some questions, if you have any.